Just setting my timer here. Have no fear. I am very cognizant of the fact that I'm standing between you and lunch, so I promise no delays. Glad you were all able to get through this morning's existential crisis in the keynote. Come here, learn a little bit more about how we can defend our networks, even in the face of an uncaring universe. As he said, my name is Matt Gracie. I work for a company called Security Onion Solutions. Has anyone heard of Security Onion? Familiar with it? All right, awesome. So Security Onion, for those of you who don't know, is a free open source network monitoring platform. If you want to play around with it, you can just go to our GitHub and download it. It's all free software. We don't even want your email address, right? The company that I work for provides professional support, training, that sort of thing. But none of that is required for what I'm going to show you here. I'm going to talk a little bit about some Security Onion capabilities. None of it requires you to register or license or pay anything. I just want to get that out of the way up front. This is in no way a sales pitch. So in addition to working at Security Onion Solutions, I'm also an adjunct professor of cybersecurity at Canisius University down in Buffalo. I also organize the local B-Sides event down there. So if anyone is from Buffalo, Batavia, Greater Western New York, and you want to get involved in that community, feel free to come talk to me. I'd be really happy to meet you. Before I worked for Security Onion, I was a blue teamer for about 15 years. So I worked in active network defense, building logging infrastructures, doing investigation, that sort of thing. I actually got my start working in higher ed, which is probably part of what draws me to working with open source software, right? Because when you work in higher ed, you have no money, you're not allowed to actually change anything, and you need to go secure a giant network with endpoints that you don't control. It's a lot of fun. I recommend it to everybody as a starting place. It's a real trial by fire. But open source software got me through a lot of that, and so I'm really happy to work with it today. What I'm going to be talking about specifically today is deception engineering and what are called honey techniques. This is a really interesting innovation in defensive security over the last few years, and I like it because it's cheap to implement, it's fairly low overhead, and the false positive rate is incredibly low. So we're going to talk a little bit about what deception engineering is exactly, and then ways that you can implement it in your environment. Again, everything I'm going to show you today is free stuff. You can go implement this afternoon if you leave after lunch, which I don't recommend. All right. So when we talk about deception engineering, we're obviously contrasting it against detection engineering. So detection engineering, for those of you who are new to the field, is a term that you'll sometimes see for taking threat intelligence or taking indicators of compromise and building detections around them, right? So taking known malicious activity and finding a way to raise an alert when you see that malicious activity in your environment. Is somebody running Mimikatz? Is there traffic to an IP that my ISAC has flagged as malicious? Did my CrowdStrike just go off because somebody's running Mimikatz again, right? So you build these detections around stuff that you know is bad, right? The intent is irrelevant. The action that you're observing is action that you have pre-identified as bad traffic or bad activity. Deception engineering, on the other hand, is kind of flipping that on its head. It's saying, what if I can make activities that appear to be benign, that an attacker would not think that I have a detection for, because it looks like normal everyday occurrences, but I've somehow booby-trapped it, right? I've somehow put a trap in my network that I want the attacker to stumble across. So they're going to do something that they don't think of as a high-risk activity. If an attacker is running Mimikatz, they know that there's a chance it's going to be detected. So they're going to pair it with an EDR bypass, they're going to compile it in some custom way to have a different hash, right? They're going to try to elude the behavior analysis I might have on my network. But if an attacker does something that they feel is benign, looking up something in Active Directory, something that shouldn't raise any flags at all, how do I build a trap around that and make sure that it fires? I don't know how many of you are familiar with Chris Sanders. He's kind of a big name in defensive security. He wrote the book on this stuff, which I'm not speaking metaphorically. He actually wrote a book called Intrusion Detection Honeypots, which is fantastic, and you should check it out if you haven't. But part of his thesis is that we can do a lot to defend our networks by understanding and guiding the behavior of attackers, right? If you know where somebody's going to look, you can control what they see, and if you put something valuable there, you can control what they think. You can guide the attacker into these traps to make them easier to detect, right? If you dangle something in front of them, like what appears to be a domain admin credential, they're not going to be able to resist. They're going to have to try it out. And if you can build alerting around that so that when that credential executes, you immediately get an alert, what do you do? You know that somebody is in your network. You know that somebody has just compromised wherever you were hiding that credential. And you know it with excellent fidelity, because there's no way that a normal person on your network is going to stumble across it, right? You put it somewhere where only an attacker will see it. I apologize, this is a little bit of an eye chart on this projector, but this is the classic MITRE attack tactics list, right? What Lockheed Martin called the kill chain. Basically, how does an attack proceed from the initial compromise through the exfiltration of data? By setting up these deception techniques, we can lay traps in the early part of the kill chain, in the early part of the tactics list. So when they're doing reconnaissance, or when they're doing initial access, or especially when they're trying to establish persistence or privilege escalation, we can lay traps in our network to catch them at that point, right? This is going to work more effectively than relying entirely on defenses and detection engineering techniques. If we lay these traps in such a way that the attackers don't see them, then we've actually added a new layer to our defenses, right? So if we say layer one of our defenses is our EDR software, our firewall, right? All of our basic hardening guidelines. When those fail, then these deception engineering techniques can act as an alarm for us to say, not only has this failed, but this is the point in our network, this is the point in our environment that the attacker has reached, where they were able to reach this trap and trigger it, right? Now, the stuff that I'm going to talk about today has a few prerequisites. This is stuff that you need to have squared away in your environment. And I mean, most of this is basic sort of table stakes security stuff, but I want to be explicit about this. This is stuff that you need to have active and configured and running in your environment before you start looking at deploying honey techniques. One is asset inventory, right? Number one on the top 20 list. Number two on the top 20 list, hardware and software asset inventory. The problems that everybody has and nobody solves. But we need to be at least a little of the way down the road. The reason for that is, one, if you want to set up traps, if you want to set up honeypots, you need to know what's legitimately on your network so you can make it blend in, right? You need a way to differentiate between legitimate and illegitimate services. So having an asset inventory that is, I'm not going to say complete, because in the 20-some years I've been in IT, I've never seen a complete asset inventory, but at least reasonably close to complete. You need to have centralized logging. The reason for that is you need to know when one of these traps gets triggered, right? So you need to have some way to get information in front of your analysts, in front of your response team to say, this has happened, there's been a trigger on the network, you know, where do we go? What do we do? Where did it come from? How do we know? You need to have some sort of alerting function. And by alerting function, I don't just mean you need to have an email address that the alerts go to that nobody ever reads. I mean, you need to have an actual process in place. When an alert comes in, does it go to a SOC? Does it go to some sort of clearinghouse where it's being looked at by analysts or being looked at by engineers, so that when something like this happens, you are aware of it? And finally, you need an incident response plan. It can be fairly simple, right? But you need to have a run book that says, when one of these alerts comes in, here's what I do. Here's how I'm going to deal with it. Here's how I'm going to investigate it. Here's how I'm going to figure out who this adversary is, how they got into my network, and how I can kick them out, right? But if you have all of this stuff in place, then you can deploy a lot of these deception engineering techniques in order to generate these high fidelity alerts and then discover the adversary earlier in the kill chain. So the first piece I'm going to talk about is canary tokens. This is an open source project. It's by a company called Thinkst Canary. I don't know if anybody has run across these before. The software backing it is all open source. You can get it from GitHub if you want to run your own Canary token server, your own Canary token environment. If you just want to play around with this, you don't have to go to all that trouble. You don't have to stand it up on your own. You can just go to canarytokens.org, which is where I got this screenshot from, and it will give you the option to build a bunch of different kinds of Canary tokens. What Canary tokens are small, I guess you'd call them data constructs. I don't know, it sounds fancy. That will raise an alert when they're interacted with. So in this case, I'm probably going alphabetically. AWS keys, that's one of the Canary tokens you can build. You see there are two input boxes there. The first one, provide an email address. That is, when somebody interacts with this Canary token, where does the alert go, right? Who should I send an email to? Or what webhook URI, which is the other option there, what webhook URI should I reach out to? So you can set this to send you an email. You can set this to hit a Discord server. You can set this to hit PagerDuty, whatever you're using for alerting. On the back end, it can execute any arbitrary webhook URI as soon as this AWS credential is used. The second one, reminder note when this token is triggered. This is vital. Future you will thank past you an awful lot when this triggers in 19 months, right? You want to have a good naming scheme or a good identification scheme for these Canary tokens, because you're not going to make one and you're not going to make two. You're going to make dozens and you're going to scatter them all over your network, right? If you're making these AWS keys, why not generate a set for every developer laptop in your environment and push them out? And then when one of those laptops gets pwned and the adversary tries to use the AWS credentials that they think are legitimate that are cached on there, you'll know exactly whose laptop it was, right? You can get that granular, but it requires a little bit of preparation beforehand so that you can build these designations into the tokens. What does it look like when a token fires? Well, it just looks like this. You get a Canary token triggered message. In this case, I had it triggered via an email, and I get my channel, that is how the token was interacted with. I get the timestamp. I get the reminder that I had entered, what the token type is. And then this being sort of an HTTP style token, I get the source IP. That is the internet-facing IP of the network from which the token was fired, not necessarily the host IP if it's inside a NAT boundary. And I get the user agent that triggered it. So in this case, I took that AWS credentials Canary token and I used it in the AWS command line client on a Linux box, right? I think I did a enumerate S3 buckets command on it. As soon as I ran that command with these credentials, I got this email, right? So you can take these credentials and, again, scatter them around your network. Put them in your internal GitHub repositories. Put them on your developers' laptops. You're setting up tripwires all over the place, so if an attacker compromises these things and tries to use it for lateral movement, you've immediately got a high-fidelity alert telling you that something got pwned, right? There are a lot of different varieties of Canary tokens. This is just the stuff that's available for free on the site. You can use AWS or Azure credentials. As I said, as soon as somebody tries to use those to authenticate to one of those cloud environments, you will get an alert. Anywhere that touches AWS or Azure in your environment is a good place to put these. If you want to hide them in a backup profile in your CI/CD pipeline, right? If that gets compromised and somebody's checking to see what those credentials are good for, you caught them. There are several different varieties of Office documents that you can generate with the Canary token site. Now, I'll warn you, the way the Office documents ones work is they put a one-by-one web bug, like a tracking graphic, into the Office document. So if the person opens it on a local machine, then it will make the URL look up, then the Canary token will fire. If they open it in Office 365 on the web, or if they open it in LibreOffice, or if they open it in some other non-Microsoft Office fashion, it may not function. So just fair warning, something I noticed during testing. You can set Canary tokens for DNS names. So if you build your own Canary token infrastructure inside your environment, and you put a bunch of DNS names, prod-backup.domain.edu or whatever, you will know when somebody is doing lookups against that list because they'll look up that DNS name and it will fire, right? You can catch someone even when they're doing early reconnaissance, right at the very beginning of the attack chain, because they'll hit these tripwires and you'll be able to catch them. You can wrap particular Windows EXEs if you're interested, so that when those are fired on a workstation, you get an alert. So if somebody in your accounting department is running Who Am I or net.exe, which is something that nobody in your accounting department will ever be doing legitimately, right? You can get an alert for that. The web redirects is one of my favorite ones. You can set up a HTTP canary token that acts almost as a proxy. And what it will do is it will accept the incoming connection. It will forward them to whatever URL you specify. So you can bury this in internal documentation, or you can put it in a juicy looking email in one of your executives' inboxes, right? Somebody follows this link, it will forward them to the right place, but it will run a JavaScript scraper first to pull up things like their IP address, their geographic location, information about their endpoint, right? So you'll get this alert and it will come packaged with a bunch of useful metadata for the response piece. Very, very handy. The last two that I want to mention, Thinkst has a deal with some of the payment processors to set aside credit card numbers to use as canary tokens. So you can generate those, stick them in your POS records, stick them in a spreadsheet in your accounting department, right? If anybody tries to use those, you'll immediately get an alert that says somebody's trying to use this stolen credit card number that you registered. And WireGuard profiles. So this being a technical audience, I'm assuming you're familiar with WireGuard, sort of a VPN platform, right? So WireGuard profiles are used in a lot of places to connect back to Office resources, right? Because you can use a WireGuard profile to connect back to the mothership and get more corporate data. One of the really great use cases for a canary token WireGuard profile is that WireGuard profiles can be deployed to phones, right? Phones and iPads and mobile devices, places on the network that we don't have a lot of visibility as defensive security practitioners, right? You've got a million iPhones in your environment and you're just kind of hoping they didn't get pwned. In this case, you can generate WireGuard canary token profiles, use your MDM solution to push them out to people's phones, and then if somebody's phone gets compromised and the attacker tries to use that WireGuard profile, you'll know immediately. And if you set your notes up properly, you'll know exactly whose phone got popped, right? Who it was that downloaded Candy Crush with the special malware bonus that's now harvesting their data. So this is a really cool capability that you probably don't have from any of your traditional security tools, and you can set it all up for free. It's pretty awesome. All right. Before I move on to the next subject, any questions on canary tokens? Yeah.
Have you ever seen canary tokens utilized offensively? So, for example, the web redirects resetting someone's startup web page to be able to track it or monitor?
I have not, but that's a pretty awesome idea. Yeah.
Similar question. It sounds very much into active model. Is there any chance you could look at some legal issues, especially if you're sending a payment back to the attacker and scraping information?
Well, you're not. I suppose technically you're kind of scraping from the attacker with the HTTP one, but it's really just pulling the information out of the initial HTTP request they made. I am not a lawyer. I feel like I should stop there. All right. So another technique that, again, very easy, very straightforward, very fun is using honey docs, right? You build some documents with really tempting names, passwords.txt, payrolldata.xls, stuff like that. Put it on a file share. If you're in a Windows environment and you're sharing files via your Windows domain controllers or your Samba shares or whatever, if anybody logs in to read that file, and transfer it to their own workstation. So if you have an attacker that's doing lateral movement and is trying to find credentials in the environment, they're pulling all these back to a compromised endpoint, you're going to see that file moving on the wire, right? So if you have something in your environment like Zeek, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Zeek, but it's a network monitoring tool. Every file that goes by on the wire, it generates a hash for. So you can just write an alert and say, hey, if you see this particular file hash moving anywhere on the network, raise an alert. Let me know, right? That means somebody just found it on a file share and downloaded it to their local machine. Now, there's two cases here. One is you have a very curious internal employee who's either about to get fired or field promoted to the security team. Or two, you've got an adversary who's doing some reconnaissance work inside your network, right? But this will give you, again, a simple high-fidelity alert where you can spot this stuff for no price at all. Another option, if you have an EDR product that allows you to generate hashes for files that are being interacted with, you can put a rule in there to do it as well, right? So you can say if somebody opens up this Excel document, or if somebody opens up this passwords.txt that I put in the developer's laptop, go ahead, alert on it, let me know, and then you can sort of bank that right into your normal alert investigation workflow, right? A sort of next level version that you can do with that is sometimes called honeycreds, building fake accounts, right? You create a domain account, you name it something like web admin, right? You give it a very tempting sounding name. You give it no valid login hours. So they can't actually connect to anything, they can't actually log into anything, but it just sits there like the forbidden apple, right? Looking so tempting to a threat actor. You could put the credentials in a honeydoc somewhere. So if you put that passwords.txt file somewhere, put the web admin password in there as well and see if they log into it, right? Or if they attempt to log into it, rather. You can also, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, the slides are all posted on my GitHub, so the link is at the end, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. But you can also seed the credentials into memory on a sampling of machines across your environment. So you can write a script that attempts to do a run as. Even if it's unsuccessful, it will still put the password hash into memory, and then you just sit back and wait for someone to dump LSAS or to run Mimikatz, pull those credentials out, try to run a past the hash attack, whatever. And as soon as those poisoned credentials are used, you get an alert, right? Again, this is why you want to have the centralized logging and the alerting function, so you can write these rules, so if this account shows up anywhere, you know what happened. If you want to get real fancy, you can do multiple accounts in different parts of your environment, so you know what kind of box got popped, but you'll definitely get at least the IP where they're trying to use it, and that will be a good pointer for your incident response process. And these techniques can all be layered, right? You can put the honeycreds inside of a honey doc and generate that doc using a canary token, and then you'll get multiple alerts for each stage of this as they sort of unroll it and as they try to get into your environment. So I've got a couple other techniques here that I thought were kind of cool that I ran across when I was researching this talk. These are both from NCC Group. So again, the links are at the end of the slides if you want to read more. These aren't strictly honey techniques, but I thought they were an interesting case study in using this mindset to build defenses, right? One was the Windows process killed canary. I think it was Ryuk ransomware kicked off with a batch file that killed a bunch of processes, right? So their thought was, well, how about if we build Windows services with the same name as those processes? So if somebody logs into a box and they kill, CrowdStrike.service or whatever it's called, we immediately hibernate the box and then raise an alert. This utterly neuters the ransomware attack, because while it's still in its preparation phase and while they're trying to turn off the EDR and the monitoring and everything else on the box that would prevent it from getting infected, we use that very attack, which, again, this all looks innocuous to the attacker. They just see something called CrowdStrike and they turn it off. This alerts us as defenders that something is going on there, and we can immediately react to it and raise an alert, right? So we can get out ahead of the ransomware before it gets executed while they're still trying to lay the groundwork for the attack. A similar one was the Windows uninstaller canary. They used a similar technique. They installed dummy packages with the names of endpoint protection products because there was a ransomware group that would connect to a box and say, okay, uninstall anything named CrowdStrike, uninstall anything named Carbon Black, uninstall anything named Symantec, right? So they built an MSI package that was named, you know, CrowdStrike.msi or Symantec.msi or whatever they weren't actually using in the environment. They said, if anyone ever runs uninstall against this MSI, that's a threat actor. Normal users don't do that, right? Normal users, well, I've had some, but for the most part, normal users don't just uninstall random stuff on their workstations. The guy who deleted his sound driver so he could download more MP3s, he was my favorite. But you know, in this way, we're setting up kind of a cardboard village, right? We're letting them uninstall all this stuff that is not at all what they think it is. And then when they do that, we can raise an alert, hibernate the machine. They can't proceed anymore with the infection. Our goal is to be the kid in Home Alone, right? Joe Pesci did not break into an empty house. Joe Pesci broke into a house full of traps. And that's what we need to do as defenders. We need to lay these traps and tripwires everywhere on our network so that so that attackers start questioning themselves. Even innocuous actions like using an account I found in a spreadsheet or uninstalling this process that no one will ever notice is going to raise an alarm, right? How many people have heard the expression that it's easier to be an attacker than a defender because an attacker only has to get lucky once and a defender has to get lucky every time, right? I hate that so much because once an attacker breaks in and they're in our network, we should know our network better than they do. It's only fair, right? We have the ability to stop them at every single step because we can lay these traps for them to fall into. One last piece that I want to talk about, and this is the part where it kind of collides with the security onion stuff, intrusion detection honeypots. As I mentioned, that's the name of Chris Sanders' book. He actually collaborated with us a little bit on this platform. What if instead of just the account or just the process or just the credentials, what if the whole server was a trap, right? What if we can build fake servers in our environment and then raise alerts when anyone messes with them? Again, very, very low false positives because most users, are not going to go just poking around at random servers that they find on their enterprise network, right? So this is different than a research honeypot. Research honeypots are generally placed on the global internet, made internet accessible, so that we can study attacker techniques, right? You'll put a intentionally vulnerable Exchange server, as if there's any other kind, out on the edge of your network and see how it gets attacked. In this case, we're talking about an internal host. We don't expose this to the internet, but you may have a subnet on your network that is dedicated to database servers, or you may have a subnet where all of your web resources are, right? You may have internal wikis, Confluence, that sort of thing. What you can do is build a server that looks like those, that has the same ports open, that fits into the same naming scheme, right? You can even apply skins to it so that the login page looks the same. But if anybody tries to connect to it, it doesn't do anything and it tells the security team that somebody's messing around where they shouldn't be, right? Again, high fidelity, low false positives, and once you set it up, it pretty much runs forever. We have a node type called the Security Onion Intrusion Detection Honeypot. It plugs in with the rest of Security Onion. This is not intended to be a deeply technical talk, but if you want to nerd out about this stuff, find me at lunch. But that's essentially what it does. It allows you to put one of these honeypot nodes out in your network, or 5 or 10 or 20 or 100 of them. And then if anybody touches them, you get an alert. The install is very simple. You basically install Security Onion. You tell it, I want to make an IDH node. We have a few different types by default, so you can make it look like a Linux web server. You can make it look like a Microsoft SQL server. You can make it look like a MySQL server. But all this stuff is configurable. If you have custom apps or a particular platform that you want to emulate, you can tell it which ports you want to be open, what you want the banners to look like, etc. This is all done via Salt for configuration management, so you can basically do this once and then replicate it wherever you want. The operating requirements are incredibly low. It's something like 2 processing cores and a gig of memory, something like that. You could spin these VMs up everywhere and just drop them around your network and wait for someone to mess with them. This is the default HTTP skin, so this is what it looks like when somebody connects to one of these nodes. It just looks like a control interface for a NAS. But again, this is all fully skinnable, so if you have stuff in your environment that you want to emulate, say you've got a Confluence deployment and you want to set up one and you can call it, Confluence-dev or Confluence-backup or something else that's going to be catnip for an attacker, make it look like a Confluence login page. And then when they connect to it, and I apologize, I know that's probably way too small to read, there's actually sort of 2 stages of alerting that you get. The first is somebody connected to this HTTP host. There was a session, somebody connected to it. So you get their IP address, you get the timestamp, you get the information, like it was touched, right? Now that might be somebody internal, they fat-fingered a URL and went to the wrong place. That might be somebody port scanning because they hit port 80, it looks like an HTTP session. Might be any number of things. If they actually try to log into it, you get a second alert, which is what the second alert is there. Additionally, you get the username and password that they attempted to authenticate with. So you not only know that you have an adversary in your network, or at least somebody actively trying to log into things that they shouldn't be logging into, you also know which credentials they're trying to use to do it, right? So you know either Stan in accounting is poking around again because he just used his username and password on this fake server, or somebody got their account popped and now an adversary is trying to use it for escalation or for lateral movement. And again, all of this stuff is free, easy to deploy, real low overhead. I've been doing blue team stuff a long time, and I firmly believe that honeypots and deception engineering is a big game changer, especially in smaller environments. All right, so 2 quotes in conclusion. I'm sure you're all familiar with Swift on Security, probably one of the best security Twitter accounts out there, and I love this. To defeat attackers, you got to bring them down to your level and just beat the hell out of them with it because it's your network, right? They may have gotten lucky once. They may have gotten in, but we're going to catch them and we're going to throw them out because that's what we do. And David Weston, who's a VP at Microsoft, don't play their game. Don't just sit there and wait to be compromised and wait to be a victim. Make them fight for every inch of territory inside your network, right? It's not 1998 anymore. We can't build networks that have a crunchy outside and a soft chewable center. We need to put these traps everywhere, right? Because we need to catch these guys. All right, I got some time left for questions. If you want to talk to me about this stuff, there's my Twitter account, or X, or whatever we're calling it now. There's my email address. Feel free to send me a note. There is my GitHub. My slides for this talk, as well as other talks I've given the last few years, are all up there. And as an added incentive, ask a question, get a squishy onion. Oh, I can't throw it that far, man. Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to handle that? What's that response that you see organizations implementing to, Bob who accessed the payroll file with your file share?
Mm-hmm.
Because, something curious is not really an insider threat necessarily. It's that curiosity kills the cat.
Right. And I mean, obviously I don't want to speak for the HR policies in any particular place, but part of that comes down to where do you put this, right? I mean, you're not really going to want to put a honey doc on a publicly accessible share. You probably want to put it someplace that's only available to a particular department or perhaps a particular group in AD, so you can kind of narrow down the spec. You probably don't want to put it someplace that the summer interns can access because they're going to crawl all over it. But that's going to have to be kind of a case-by-case thing. Yeah.
So, kind of 2-part questions. One, policy-wise, and the second one is follow up on cleanup. You say that there are logs of the attempted
Right.
So obviously, there has to be some type of policy follow-up on people logging into those systems, and then when they do try their credentials, those are actually now stored in plain text. How do you remediate people with that, aside from the policy side?
Right. So you could build an automated trigger to go back and expire their password if you wanted.
I mean, it's not, yeah, of course, aside from force rotating,
Yeah.
you have to have some teeth in there as well to keep them from continuing to do it,
Right.
right? Or other people.
Right. And again, it's very rare for a legitimate user to actually stumble across this. So most of the time, it would be whatever your normal policy is for rotating creds in the event of a breach. I mean, at this point, you've probably got, I'm not going to say definitely, but probably got an adversary with some creds roaming around inside your network. You're rotating everything anyway. Yeah.
How about placing a canary within an email? Write yourself an email, save it someplace in your mail folder. And if somebody gets into your mail account, starts moving around, they trigger that when they pull up an email.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. So the question was, what about putting a canary token inside an email? There's a few different types that can do that.
You could embed a link inside of an email and tie it to one of those HTTP tokens, so you get the metadata when they go to it. You could also add it as a tracking pixel. You could add it as the sending domain on an email. So when the person is looking at it in the email client, the DNS lookup happens, right? That's kind of the nice thing about these canary tokens is that they're very flexible. If you can think of anything that interacts with the internet, you can drop a token on it, right? And get alerted when that interaction happens.
So, all these things are very nice, but when you're taking these to your network, do you need to control like the more valuable assets, or you think randomly?
I think it's,
It's also one of, I guess that's also one of the major SIT attacker that said,
yeah, so the question is, do you prioritize sort of crown jewel assets as opposed to
right.
scattering them around? Again, it's going to kind of depend on how your network is set up, but I think counterintuitively, you're probably already concentrating defenses very heavily on your crown jewels, right? You're probably neglecting the parts of your network that are things like development systems. So going back to that analogy earlier, and I totally stole this from a guy named Tim Crowthers who did a honeypot talk at B-Sides Augusta a few weeks ago. That's kind of the layer 2 part of the architecture, right? You've really hardened the area of your network around your production databases and your production CI/CD pipeline and all that stuff, but you're probably not hardening your Confluence or your SharePoint or your dev environment or your sort of mess around space for your app dev team. So if you scatter this stuff around there, then you'll know when those weaker defenses have been surmounted. Okay.
I do have more on me. Any more questions? Yeah.
When it comes to the DNS, honeypots,
Right.
tokens, do you think it would be, in your experience, would it be better to go for fake hostings or something like internet.domain?
So it's kind of going to depend on how you implement it.
Yeah.
That's never be water.
Oh, they're there. If you do the ones from the Canary Token site, it's going to be like a long hex string .canarytokens.org, right? So it's going to be kind of obvious. If you build it yourself, and the Canary Tokens platform is all Dockerized, it's really easy to spin up yourself, then you can name it whatever you want. So, something that looks plausible within the naming scheme of your environment. So if you have a SharePoint, you want to name it SharePoint-corp.domain or SharePoint-dev.domain, right? And then when somebody's doing reconnaissance and they're trying to enumerate all your stuff, they'll hit that and the token will go off. Right.
All right. Anybody else? Yes.
Like around the use cases of doing certain devices that you have to run.
devices like, firewall, like alarm and that, or this sort of thing. It's tough because a lot of them are kind of Windows or file based. Probably could, depending on the device, if you wanted to set up some honeycreds and then flag people who try to log into your panel with it or log into your system. Again, this is assuming that you are centrally gathering all those logs,
So you know when there's a bad authentication attempt against your firewall or against your VPN concentrator. Just anecdotally, it's probably worth reviewing how you're regulating and logging things like VPN connection attempts and VDI pool connection attempts anyway, because there tends to be a lot of configuration drift with that stuff. I just saw a breach a while back where DA credentials were brute forced because somebody configured a VPN concentrator to authenticate against Active Directory and forgot to put any of the retry limiting in place. So the attacker got in, got one account, and was like, well, this is the name of the DA account. I'll just hit it from the outside on the VPN concentrator until I get password 123 or whatever it was. But yeah, you could definitely use those techniques at least to spot authentication attempts there. All right. Anybody else?
Outside of the one theme you mentioned, are there really many ways to try to say iOS icons?
Oh, well, I'm sure there are vendors that will tell you there's plenty. Yeah, there's a couple good ones. The WireGuard one is good. Another technique that I liked was you can generate canary token QR codes. And somebody said, yeah, I generated a whole bunch of these, and then I planted emails in everyone's box that said, scan this with your phone to enroll in MDM and MFA. So if anyone ever actually scans it, we'll know it's an adversary because they found it and now they're trying to register a device, which is a fairly common threat technique. So I thought that was a clever one. All right. Yes.
DNS token, would you be able to implement or utilize that with like email aliases?
I'm not sure how that chain would work exactly. I mean, basically, you need the attacker to do the DNS lookup. You might be able to do it in the other direction, like if you send them an email with the reply to set to a token, then they'll look it up when they get it.
Like a legitimate domain.
Yeah.
Attacker dot at, alias at gmail.com, and then get an alert when actually that email gets sent.
Right. Or, yeah, or when it gets opened at least.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for your attention. I appreciate it.